Uh, so the last time that we spoke about this dementia space and senior living, you
Mhm,
had mentioned that we would do well to have senior centers in general be around small children
mhm,
and preschools. And I resonate with that idea. And I want us to put it out in the consciousness that can we
mhm,
do that? Can we build senior citizens around preschools, around a garden
mhm.
that
I
that we
think
all work in?
right. I think to me that is like the epitome of a community growth and education environment, I think. I working in long-term care, the number one thing that any resident will tell you is that they don't feel like they have purpose. And I heard an activities director one time, she compared it to living on a cruise ship. And she's like, we give them all of these like fun activities to do. But if you were just like having a party every day, like if you went on a cruise and then
Right.
they didn't ever let you come home, you couldn't wash
Hmm.
dishes, you couldn't make your own food, you couldn't wash your own clothes or do anything that made you feel like you were a productive member of this community, you would lose your mind
Hmm.
because you have no purpose, like in the tiniest sense, like folding a napkin sense of purpose.
Right.
And that is one way that I feel as though young child care at really all levels, but like preschool and elder care could combine to really benefit everyone. I mean, I used to bring my son, I worked 4 days a week, and I would bring him on the fifth day to visit the elders on the dementia unit. And it's incredible, like the way that everybody would react. I mean, the most angry guy on that unit who you could not communicate with would want to like hold my baby and just like whisper little things and tell him how beautiful he was. And yeah. And all the women whose like mothery nurturing skills would come out and they'd all be like yelling across the room, do this and don't do that. He looks cold, he looks hot, he needs to. But it was just this immediate sense. And even now, so have not worked in that facility for 2, 3 years.
Hmm.
And there are still some residents who are there who knew me. And if when I bring him in, for I just had a friend who was at a senior living center, got a terminal diagnosis, was transferred to this long-term care setting, and was there for a very short 6 weeks before she transitioned. And I was going in on a daily basis to sit with her and spend time with her. And when Ronan was with me, he was there. And I know CNAs, and so they would take him and go play games. He was all over the facility. He's very comfortable there. But these residents were like, who had known him as a baby, just were so like it was their grandchild. Like, oh my gosh, he's gotten so big, and we're so proud of him. And he told us this, and he told us that. And it's like in the simplest way, it brought so much joy and so
Yeah.
much peace and so much purpose. Like there was a guy who was like, "Where's the next time I came in without him? Well, where's Ronan? I was supposed to teach him how to play pool." And he's like waiting by the door because he knows I come in around the same time every day. And so that man got up in the morning thinking about my baby and teaching him
Right.
pool.
Right.
Like,
Purpose.
how could that possibly be a bad thing, you know?
Right.
Aside from
Yeah.
the other aspects of it, imagine being a shift worker in healthcare who
Yeah.
has to get called in or who has to work in inclement weather and a place to
Hmm.
have your children at work
Yeah.
with you, you
Yes.
know? Like,
Yes. That would be incredible.
mhm,
It would be so helpful and build community. And also, when you're talking about that element of curiosity, if you were to have little like
mhm,
3-year-olds, toddlers talking with dementia patients,
mhm.
both have this immense imagination and curiosity and this sense of not being separate. That like anytime you tell them a new story, they're excited for it. They're not going to call you out. They're like, "Oh my God, that's amazing." And if they could
Exactly.
always be that way as they grow up from like 3, 4, 5, that's amazing. I love that. That's amazing. Then
Mhm.
they'd be a different human.
Mhm.
as
And
they
that's
walk in the world.
one of the things that have that I heard the most after having Ronan at the vet's home a lot this summer. He being older is the residents who are cognitively intact repeatedly said to me that they couldn't believe how comfortable he was. Because most kids come in and are really nervous and don't wanna talk and don't wanna, like, even interact with anyone and hide behind their parents, and he is, like, gone up the hall with a random staff member and saying hi to everyone and hugging everyone, and I really believe that that can be fostered through I mean, we are in our household, we're not afraid of aging or dying. We respect our elders, and we talk about the wisdom that they hold.
Yeah,
And then we talk about the, like, miraculous transition out of life at the physical life, and that's just normal, you know what I mean? So there's nothing scary about it for him at all. I mean,
right.
he's very visual with his, extrasensory perception, and so he would say, like, "Mommy, I saw this person in the hallway, and I don't think they were alive anymore." And I'm like, "Probably not, it's a nursing home, they are filled."
God,
Filled with
that's
them.
so awesome.
But just, like, very commonplace. I mean, I have a sister who's a medium, and
Yeah,
I am
right.
who I am, so clearly this is he does not have any world where these things are not all interacting with each other.
I love that. Can we all be like that? That would be incredible.
Mhm. It's really and I wish that people could see, like, even in 10 minutes of him wandering around, just like you
Yes.
can watch faces or body language, like, the way that people react to that and how much joy it gives them. I
Yeah,
just think it would be the most beneficial for everyone, and think about how much wisdom there is to
so
be
much.
had from our elders. Think about
Mhm,
how much they've learned, what they've been through. I mean,
mhm.
the things I've learned caring for elders is astounding. Like, I'm obsessed with the Vietnam War and the societal culture around that time, and vets who served in the Vietnam War. And I
Mhm.
have sat with so many of them who have, like, this incredible insight into their own internal process, what it was like to come home, what the societal culture was like and the rhetoric was like
Yeah,
around them, and just, like, this really profound insight to, like, and you would think there's so many people say, right, well, he lives alone in the woods, this grumpy old man, he has PTSD or whatever. Well, like, he
yeah,
did that because he knew that he might not be safe to be around other people. And
right,
so I just feel like there are so many things that I've learned from conversation that I can apply to my own life, or it's a perspective that helps me with another person. And how
right,
could that not benefit the
right.
children as well? I mean, if you think about historically speaking, that's who was taking care of your children. If you
Mhm.
were
It was
working,
when we were in villages, it's the
right,
elders that took care of the children.
right, right. And
Yeah.
even one, I'm I think this is probably pretty common. I have so much respect and admiration for elders who are, like, multiple generations removed for me, but I struggle sometimes with the ones who are my parents and their age. And my sister and I have been talking about this a lot lately because we both parent very differently than we were parented.
Uh-huh.
And her daughter is a year and a half, and my son's 5. So I've been doing this a little bit longer. But she's really coming up against this frustration with the way my parents are responding to her daughter now that she's becoming more verbal, which
Mhm.
is another thing that we do to kids everywhere. It's you're very
Yeah,
amazingly cute until you learn how to talk, and we find out that you don't actually want to do everything we tell you to do,
right,
and you're no
right.
longer cute. Um, and so she's, like, witnessing this, and she's getting really frustrated, and in her, it's so much easier to see and work
Right.
through in her when I'm not having my own moment. But I've really been thinking about all the different types of wisdom, and even, like, how I spoke to dementia, right? Like, we
Mhm.
think that an elder should sit around a campfire and tell us a story, and that's how we'll learn. but maybe it's being really frustrated with
Yeah.
this
Right.
person who used to be our mom and now needs our help going to the
Mhm.
bathroom. And then learning about ourselves in that process is actually how she's teaching you,
Right.
and seeing as much value in these
Absolutely.
lessons that come in hard ways as the ones that come in like the kumbaya way. And
It
so I
never
said,
comes in the kumbaya
no,
way.
never,
That's just
ever.
fake.
Not once has it ever been that, except for in a Disney movie.
Right.
Um, and so we've been talking about like, okay, but we love ourselves and we're proud of who we are.
Mhm.
And we, as sisters, our bond as adults has gotten so much closer as we
Mhm.
like process through what our childhood was. And wait, did you this happen to you? Did anybody ever say this to you? Like, is it stuck in your brain forever, or did you just let it go? What is this? And so how do we like how do we stand there with them and process through all of it with them and provide this open, safe space for them, but still allow them to have these experiences that we are in agreement at the end of the day
Mhm.
did teach us something and did
Right.
develop who we are, even if it's we learned what we don't want to do. And so,
Mhm.
how do we,
Exactly.
let them have those experiences and value those experiences and
Mhm.
value that wisdom that is being imparted, even though it's not in alignment with our values and our methods and our approaches?
Right. Right. That's grace. Right. How do we offer grace?
Hmm.
So, I want to go back to your bio. There
Hmm.
is a sentence in there that you say, the powerful alchemy available to us in moments of transition offers the most potent opportunities for healing and growth. You sort of shared a little bit what that looks like in this previous story that you just shared, but also let's talk about the various points of transition that we experience in our human lifetimes.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's really interesting because taking a bird's eye view of all of the humans that I've worked with since I left my career as a speech pathologist is when I really came into this idea of being a doula, because I had been interested in being a death doula. I know a lot about and have been through a lot of the death transition. But I realized that really each of these humans, and even myself, when I've looked to guidance from someone else or asked someone to stand next to me while I'm going through the thing, it's always in this transition. One part of something is changing into another part of something.
Mhm.
And that space of the unknown in the middle is so destabilizing, and we tend to fear that. I think we've been really conditioned and taught to believe that that's bad.
Yeah.
But I believe and I've experienced and witnessed that that is the most powerful energy there is. It's like a little bit of chaos, but really
Mhm.
from the unknown, like anything can happen.
Mhm.
So you can be going through just as powerful of a transformation, changing jobs,
Yeah.
moving,
Mhm.
um, dealing with the transition of a loved one, dealing with the framework that you're about to become a parent, not even to the birth, transitioning a soul
Right.
into this world, but
Mhm.
like,
Yes.
who am I now that I am responsible for another life? Or I don't like that phrasing at all, that I am here to witness another life
Mhm.
as it evolves and grows.
Yeah.
Um, and there's just, I think it's because everything is unstable and everything is shaky and nothing is known yet. It's just like this fertile ground to sow whatever you want to sow into it.
I like that. I like that analogy because, again, we are all different humans. We're all individuals. And so, where we experience transition, we don't know. It could be anything, right? It could be like spiritual work, and you're experiencing it, the transition of your ego self. And
Mm-hmm.
so, it's these different moments. And also, when you understand child development, when a child goes from age 3 to 4 or 2 to 3, there's this
Mhm.
transition. Also, age 9 is very important. That's a transition. How do we hold? And I think
Mhm.
what you're saying is you will recognize these transition when there's chaos, when there's moments of fear, but also understanding that the unknown is not something to be fearful of, but
Mhm.
something to embrace.
Exactly.
And
Mhm.
you walk people through those different stages. If
Mhm.
you're feeling chaos, you would be
Right.
somebody that you could walk these
Mhm.
people through.
And because in my experience at those times, it's just having a witness can be the most stabilizing experience. It doesn't your I truly believe that your guidance is for you and other people have no business guiding you. In term I have paid a lot of different people a lot of money. And I've tried out all the different things.
Yeah.
But I and that has led me to being very solid in who I am and what I believe and what my guidance is. And so I really believe that having someone standing next to you and witnessing it in some way, I don't know that we're social creatures or communal creatures or what that is, but having somebody else with you and witness it gives you the pause
Mhm.
to become intentional. Because when we're afraid of something,
Yes.
you can't. I mean, we know this like biologically, neurologically speaking, if when you're in a fear state, you cannot be intentional. You can't plan, you can't use these higher functions of your brain. And
Yeah.
while planning is not always what's needed, you also can't hear yourself.
Right.
So, and often our brain, which is handling all the fear response, is throwing it out there to try to protect us. So it might also be throwing out a lot of other memories and other evidence
Mhm.
of things being scary or things being dangerous or trying to really instill in you that you should be afraid right now. And really just taking that second to pause and share your experience with someone else
Mhm.
is enough. And from what I have seen thus far in my life, to just take the tension out of it, to take the fear out of it. Like, okay, I said it out loud,
Right.
and here we are. And it brings you like right into that present moment. And then I really feel like, as that person, I think any of us can do this for each other. But it's
Yes.
really, really important to stay with the curiosity.
Yeah.
If you can adopt this philosophy that like your advice is for you, even if you're watching someone else, they're a mirror for you. And so what you're getting from that is advice for you. And then know that other people have advice that's only for them. Then get curious again about like, who is this person? What is their advice? How are they going to walk through this? Why is this so important to them? Versus, based on my lived experience, this is not what you should do. Or based on my last client, this is not what you should do. And stay in that curiosity. You can be right next to someone through all of it without creating reliance or codependency or any kind of stickiness where you're getting involved in in things that somebody else needs to learn ultimately. Even if what you see for someone else is the thing, is true, is right, is where they should go, we learn, like you said, in these painful moments of discomfort in getting to that process. And so all of this advice giving and one methodology will take you here really takes away the power of everyone that you're interacting with. If we think we know better than the other, then that takes away all of their power to learn, to grow, to discover their own way. You know what I mean?
Mia, you have literally just described why Perfect Child exists. because we want to get to that place, because it is ingrained in us that as parents, we know best. And
Mhm.
we need to look for teachable moments.
Mhm.
And that's not true.
Mhm.
I don't know what's going on.
Oh, wow.
And
We're
then,
celebrating.
and then, and also what's great is when I interview people, I interview them, it's sort of like a marketing thing, right? So it's like, I'm going to bring these, what you share is more about you, and people seek you out. But
Mhm.
what you are saying is so beautiful because you are telling people that every person can be a doula for their friend, for their child, for their parent, their grandparent. You have the capability when we ourselves embody that curiosity and understand that everyone has their own journey. And if we just pause, they will come to it. It is
Mhm.
not our job to instill anything in anybody.
Mhm.
It's our job just to listen. And literally, when we're having a conversation with somebody and they're sharing their experience, what's my lesson as I sit here and listen?
Mhm. That's the
That
thing.
is amazing.
It's
Thank you,
really
Mia.
it's it's like a very full circle. Like this is like I always felt when I was growing up, maybe this will be helpful to people who are listening, who have children who are like me. I always felt like I was telling people my truth, and it never felt like I was being heard. Even now, some I will tell a story or say how I felt about a certain, and we were talking about high school the other night at my parents' house. And I said something, and my mom was like, "That's not true. You loved it." And I was like, "That is so fascinating. Where were you?" But from her judge of what an appropriate teenager looks like, I I was filling all the boxes. I had all of the things. And when I was telling her all of the things, she was probably thinking, how do I help this? How do I fix this? How do I make it stop? Like so often, this is my my motivation in life is to sit with people in their pain because I have had so often the opposite response. There are times in my life where I have sat down. This happened pretty recently, like within the past month. I sat down on a very like a small love seat next to my dad, and I was having a really, really bad day. And he got up and moved away. Could have been a million different things, right? Like a million different things. But what that said to me was that your energy is very uncomfortable and I don't want to be close to it. I'm an adult now. I know that there are one, a million other reasons why the man could have gotten up. Two, that even if he did, that's okay. Not everybody has to sit with you in your pain or ask what's wrong. But at 34 years old, I realized that was this last week this happened, where it was like there was a whole room of people and there was one family member who was actually aware of how another person was feeling. Like I was just sitting and watching. Like this person had like all of the signs of like really tough emotions going on. And everybody else just went on. Like they would look at them, they would see some people would make eyes at each other across the room, like, oh wow, they look like they're having a rough day. But only one person out of the entire family unit that was present went over to them and was like, man, you seem like you're having a rough day. What's going on? And it's so, so common. And I
Mhm.
don't know if I know for a fact that people don't have any idea that they're doing it or
Right.
don't understand
Yeah.
what they're saying with those actions. But I think it's really important to listen. And I think it's really, really important to be intentional with how you're communicating beyond your words.
That's everything. Words don't matter.
At all.
Our intentions do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And
Oh, Mia, so much
children,
work to do. This conversation's over.
we're done. But that's the thing about children though. And that's what I think can be so damaging about being a child on this planet, or has been so damaging, is, and this is why people who have dementia also cannot integrate with adult society. They see the actions, they feel the intention, and that is what they are listening to.
Right. Right.
They,
So are children.
right.
Mhm.
And if you ask a child or someone with dementia what their impression of a situation is that was witnessed by multiple people, it is, I have asked this so many times because I'm fascinated. I see the world from a very different perspective.
Mhm.
perspective. And so I'm constantly fascinated by others who don't see it the same way I do, because it's so innate in me that I can't see it any other way. But there are so many people who, like, you can talk to three people who just witnessed the same thing, and their story about what that was, why that happened, all of the details of the whole story are completely different.
Yeah. Right.
Unless you have two children or two elders with dementia or a child and an elder with dementia. And then their stories are very, very similar. In the middle is where we've been trained to use words and not all of the other ways of communication that we have. I
Mhm.
mean, I can't tell you how many times when I was little and I would be like, I would be arguing with my parents to try to explain to them how something they did made me feel.
Yeah.
And I was wrong. And they were 100% certain that I was wrong. Like, I was lying. I was making this up. This story did not happen. They did not do that to me. And that was it was rough to, to work myself back from that one. But they weren't doing it intentionally. They weren't
No.
really trying to discredit my version of the truth. They just legitimately were incapable of seeing how
Mhm.
that action could have felt that way or been perceived that way by me, because we're
Well,
so focused on these words, you know?
words and our own perception of things and refusal to pause and take accountability.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. Pause.
Yeah,
Pause and intention.
that's the thing. I
Yeah.
just was listening to a podcast on emotional resiliency, and the man being interviewed was discussing a strategy that he actually learned from high level military operations, which is a whole other conversation. But this strategy is to look at what your goal is. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Look at I'm trying to think of what was next. You have your goal, you have what your outcome that you want to achieve, and then you think of every obstacle that could
Mhm.
potentially come up, and then you create an if then for it. So, like, if this happens, then I'm going to do this. If this happens, then I'm going to do this. If this happens, then I'm going to do this. And they use this in these high stress situations so that
Mhm.
they don't have to think about, oh gosh, an obstacle. What do we do
Right.
next? That is obviously life or death for them. But he has adopted this and uses it with clients and teaches it to his students in terms of a like a changing your mindset or shifting your
Yeah.
mindset approach. And when I was listening to it, it was like Dee and I have just gotten to this point, and we're like so into this like methodology. We do it for everything. Like, okay, it's December 1st, Christmas is coming. Who do we want to be at Christmas? Like, who do
Yeah.
we want to be as aunts? Who do we want to be as moms? What are we trying to promote? What are we trying to not promote? How are, you know what I mean? What's our position on the capitalist version of Christmas? But like really thinking about it because we kept finding ourselves, oh, great, it's Thanksgiving again. We still don't really believe in what's happening here. The way it's being celebrated by the people around us does
Right,
not feel good at all. And now
right,
it's here, and we haven't made any plans or we haven't figured anything out, and we haven't gotten intentional either. So who the hell are we to talk? But there really is so much confidence building or like self-esteem boosting that comes with that because you're
mhm,
choosing who you want to be. Even if you mess it up and doesn't work all the way, you're still taking the time to be intentional versus retroactively being like, oh my gosh, why did I do that? That doesn't
right,
align with who I am. I feel like such a jerk, or I feel so rude, or whatever it is.
right.
And it's that pause. All it takes is like a pause.
Pause and intention. We go through life without pausing. So often we just don't pause.
Mhm.
And really, when you talk about the perception of children, I just don't feel like children are given agency. And so many adults, like I just saw this post about this woman who was modeling her husband co-regulating with their daughter. Their daughter's 5. She's upset because she doesn't want to go to school tomorrow, right? And so my husband knows what to do. He's co-regulating. He's being peaceful and he picks her up and he's holding her and he's rocking her a little bit and he's humming. And my first thought was, if she's upset about going to school, that's a problem. And basically you're just saying it's okay. We're all fine. Let's co-regulate so you feel
Right.
better. But like if she's upset about going to school, if she's upset about some environment, that's giving agency. That's looking at it and saying, if you don't want to go to school, let's do something else.
Mhm. Why? Why are
Right.
you feeling this way? Like
Ex-
that's simple. And that's so interesting because that when you were talking, that's exactly what my brain was saying was like, oh. And
right.
like how early, how many people talk about this like Sunday night scaries or something I've seen
Yeah.
people call it, where they're like anxious waiting for the work week to come. Like
Right.
you're literally encoding her nervous system to
Mhm.
regulate herself through some form of abuse.
Yeah.
And I have also recently come to that realization. And I think this is where the unhinged and spiritual comes in. Like there has to be space for these big emotions that are telling us something.
Mhm.
Yes, no, no, none of us deserve to feel angry or scared or hurt all of the time. Like there needs to be an
Right.
ability to say, I am in control of this. I am safe. This is my body. No one else has control inside of here.
Right.
However, if you are using regulation tactics to get through things that you absolutely hate repeatedly, then we've completely missed everything.
Exactly.
Like that feeling is telling us something.
Right.
And the
Right.
whole point isn't just to be calm. The
Right.
point is to be able to have agency over yourself so you're not
Mhm.
completely taken over by this thing. But even sometimes that has to happen. I mean, I cried
Mhm.
for probably 6 hours yesterday, I would say, on and off. It was like a really big emotional activation for me coming from all different angles, bringing up some
Yeah.
really, really deep stuff. And I had to go through that.
Yeah.
I
Of
couldn't
course.
brush it off. I couldn't like make it okay.
Yeah.
I had to, and I let myself have the reactions that I have. Like,
Yeah.
I don't, I, my reaction is never to go too, so tells you a lot about my attachment style in my childhood. My reaction is never to go to someone when I am in distress. I want to be
Right.
as far away from them and I want to be in a
Mhm.
small enclosed space.
Mhm.
Animals are an exception. I want my Rottweiler as close to me as possible, but other than him, like and not like I'm gonna go hide here and cry. Like I will violently defend my need to be alone
Yeah.
because you are also the enemy.
Right.
And I just let myself do that. Like, I am going to sit down here on the floor next to Atticus until I'm done crying. And
Yeah.
then like we can talk about it and then we can have that moment but it has to come out of my body or move through my system. I mean,
Right.
this that I was working through, this is like 3-year-old Mia. That's really
Yeah.
deep in there. You know what I
Right.
mean? And so if I just immediately jump into regulatory things, which I have a plethora, I when I was
All the
ready,
tools.
I put my boots on, I went out into the dark, into my pine trees where all of my spirits live, and I talked to my
Yeah.
people, and I let myself all of it go, and I took a shower, and I was okay.
Yeah.
But I'm still, I have not backed down from my stance. I still feel very strongly that my viewpoint on what was happening that activated all of this is the thing. I don't have
Hmm.
that anger still in
Right.
me, but this what I used to do was ruminate and play over all of it in my head or play out hypotheticals. Like when they say this
Right.
to me, I'm going to argue. Like this is not even real, but that's, it would live in there and stay in there
Right.
and cycle and cycle and cycle because you don't ever feel it. Yeah, I didn't
Right.
scream. We have a smash
Mm.
pit here. It's like
Uh-huh.
a 3-sided cement block structure that we built out in the woods. And we have glasses and plates from like thrift stores or the dollar store.
What?
And when someone needs it, all three of us, Ronan, Andy, and I, all have an agreement that if somebody needs to go to the smash pit, then one of us will tell them and you just go out and smash as much glass as you need to because that's so satisfying. You know what I mean? Like
Amazing.
shatter and everything.
Yes.
We have safety goggles out there. And then you can immediately have a productive conversation after that. But
Mhm.
let yourself be mad. Like there's
Yeah.
nothing to be afraid of or whatever the emotion is.
Right.
There's nothing to be afraid of, but let's feel it and like let it out of our body and then figure out where to go from there.
Fantastic. I love that. I love that idea. Everyone needs a smash pit.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
I want to go back to when you talked about you walking through the pine trees and
Mhm.
speaking to all your people. You shared with me a story about this woman that you worked with in the
Mhm.
senior living center that always refused morphine. And, you didn't understand why, and that was so interesting, and you could see it. You probably like, you had an idea based on an experience that you had before that it doesn't feel good, it makes her feel numb, and she wanted to feel it, right?
Mhm.
And then she has since transitioned,
Mhm.
ascended, and you connected with her because you had said that you can speak with those that have transitioned.
Mhm.
And so you spoke with her, and what did she say?
I did. And she very much confirmed what I was feeling in the moment, that she was intentionally refusing that morphine. And that at the time, her feeling was that she deserved or wanted to be present through all of the pain that she was experiencing. And so we have a very interesting friendship. I was volunteering at a senior housing establishment. I met her. We just like connected and I thought she was really, really cool. And so I started visiting her a lot and talking to her a lot. She got this diagnosis, stage 4 lung cancer. And so the end of lung cancer is very, very painful. I mean, you're essentially drowning inside of your own body, more or less, is the way that it happens. And the entire time that I had known her, she had talked to me about her family. She did not have any children of her own, but she was like the auntie. Like she had sisters who had like 9, 10 kids, like huge families. And she was the auntie for everybody. And she told me stories. I mean, this is months that I knew her, but she would
Mhm.
always tell me stories about them. This one did that, or when I did this, or when her mom was having trouble with this and couldn't connect with her, she came and lived with me for a little while because she needed my version of maternal love. And so she had told me all of this. And I had never met any of her family because I only knew her.
Mhm.
And in the last week of her life, she was unable to communicate really anymore verbally. And she was kind of in this sort of transient sleep state. And one of the times I was there, one of her nieces came in. And so it was the first time I had ever met them. Totally strange because I was like, that's you're sitting by my aunt's bedside vigil and we don't even know who you are. It's like, well, she asked me to be here and I will always oblige. And so I talked to her and she had a very, very different view on things. And she told me that that this woman was actually estranged from all of her family except for the two nieces that were actively like her healthcare proxies and taking care of her. And talked about like her inability to shift her viewpoint sometimes and creating like tension with family members who just said, forget it, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. And so I never had that knowledge or that awareness of what others' perception of these relationships might be when I could talk to her. But immediately when I connected with her, because she passed, she transitioned. I She communicated with me what her sign would be. Like if I see a sparrow, then it's Midge. And so I knew that, but I hadn't really gone back to communicate. I honestly very rarely intentionally reach out to communicate with others. Like when someone shows up and communicates, then I'm here and I'm available, but most of the time I don't reach out. And so when I reached out to her, she immediately started on this conversation. Like I didn't even have to get into it, but that because she was there, she was present when her niece and I had this conversation, which afterwards, I, again, these things that you like really, really kick yourself for afterwards. I didn't know this is where the
Yes.
conversation was going. I thought we were just like chatting
Yes.
in the room.
Oh.
And then it turned into a whole conversation. So we were bedside having this conversation. And so when I spoke to Midge, she was like, one, livid that this had happened, but two, spoke to how that's why she felt. Like I would always tell her that I loved her and I thought she
Mhm.
was amazing. And she would that was the only time that I would see like anger come out of her.
Mhm.
Like she would
Mhm.
be really, really mad at me. And I was like,
Mhm.
you can be mad at me if you want, but you don't get to decide who I love. Sorry. I'm gonna love you. And she said like that's all that she has been punishing herself in a million different ways for the ways that these breakdowns have happened in her family. And so even like I had perceived the length of time it took her to transition in her like waiting for people to come or waiting to see people. And she said that that was not at all her motivation, is that she was just not going, like she was so convinced in this physical body that she deserved to suffer for the way that her family dynamic had turned out.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. It
Oh,
is.
gosh.
It's really interesting when you communicate with those who have transitioned out of this life because there's something expansive or spacious about it. It's like this like bird's eye view. So I feel like if I had had that conversation with Midge before she passed, I would
Mhm.
have been like sobbing in tears and like really sitting with that for so long.
Yeah.
But because the way that she presented it to me and how like she wasn't still in that space.
Mhm.
She doesn't still believe that to be true. It was just part of her journey and part of the lesson and part of the experience of being here in a body this specific time.
That is so incredible. That just
Mhm.
That story. Wow.
There's so much to be learned from those who have passed. I most of the people who have independently come to me have committed suicide. And I chalk this up to my curiosity as well, because I think a lot of people have very definitive views on ending your own life. I don't, I'm interested in what everyone's experience is. So I just want to know. And in talking, there's one specific human I can think of. I was working with his daughter-in-law, and he resides in their house. Like, he is a presence in their house. She was feeling him all the time. Her husband was feeling him all the time. There's a lot of tension, a lot of animosity. Nobody really wants him there. They're also not like us,
Right.
like just welcoming in all of the everything. So she wanted to communicate with him, but she wasn't sure how. And I was very much encouraging her to have this conversation and to do this thing, not to ask me to.
Mhm.
But when we were having a conversation about it, he like came to me and wanted to talk to her, which is also how like my sister sees, has a visual of a human who has
Mhm.
passed, and it's much more like a conversational interaction, which I have had before. But when someone comes through specifically for someone who I'm with, I sort of just leave and let them talk.
Uh-huh.
And he needed to tell her that he doesn't know what, he's not trying to scare them, but what they are feeling from him is his fear, because he doesn't know how to approach them. Because when he took his own life, he did it because he felt as though he was a burden to his son. And if he did not end his life, then his son would be stuck taking care of him forever and be unable to move on to other relationships and unable to move on with his life. He had multiple children. This son was his primary person. And so he did this out of love for his son. And now he's watching his son, like years, we're 2, 3 years into this, has been unable to cope with his transition, has spiraling mental health concerns of his own, is really, really stuck on his.
Because he couldn't accept that his father committed suicide.
And so this man is hovering and really afraid to do anything else because he's already clearly done the wrong thing and you know what I mean, this wasn't his
Right,
intention,
right.
and didn't know how to approach or to communicate in any kind of way, and there were so many barriers and walls and anger and whatever up at him, he just couldn't get through.
Right.
And I just whenever I have these conversations, I think it's really, really fascinating, because it's another one of those ways, right? Like, we attach meaning to all of these things. Like, again, I'm who I am. And when I was watching Midge in her final days, I thought she was waiting for somebody to show up who she really wanted to see so that she could have peace and closure. That's not what she was doing at all. She was like, all of you get out of here, take away the morphine, and
Yeah.
let me do this how I need to do this, because this is what I need at the end of this lifetime to wrap all of this up and to make me feel like this is
Mhm.
closed.
Right,
Like, that's the closure she needed, is that she
right,
was adequately punished for what she believes she did.
right. That is just that's mind-blowing.
Hmm. And it feels like heartbreaking, but also I think that's the, like, it brings me back to that, like, respecting everybody's path. I
Yeah.
don't understand that. I would never want someone, anyone, anywhere to punish themselves for something that happened, especially relational dynamics. There's
Right.
a whole lot of other people involved. I don't think any one of us can take the blame. But that was her path, and that was her journey. And
And
it was
his
right.
path and his journey.
Hmm. Right. And at the end of the day, what will happen? Will his son grow from this experience. You know what I mean? Like this could be the catalyst that sets him into a specific kind of research or a specific kind of work, or just transforms him emotionally in a way that prepares him to be a father. Like you have no idea what this transitional energy is here to do and how it's here to shake things up. I have I wear waist beads. It's an African tradition, ancient African tradition, and they're used as a spiritual adornment and also as a weight loss tool. I do not wear them for weight loss, but they are a permanent, non-stretchy strand of beads that you wear around your waist.
Mhm.
And I have been wearing them for, I don't even know, at least 5 years now. The woman who made my beads, I knew for years before that. I like followed her on social media and I just thought she was like this brilliant human. She's been like one of the elders who's teaching me remotely for the longest time. And we had gotten, Ronan wears them, I wear them, Dee wears them. And so like it's a big part of our spiritual practice and our family culture. And our waist bead, we were going to see her. She lives in California, but she does pop-up stops around the country. And so we were once a year, we were all going to see her. So she would cut off our waist beads that we didn't fit anymore and tie on new ones. And it's just like this really important process for us. She transitioned unexpectedly this summer
Mm.
in August. She was 49. I still don't know the details of what happened. I mean, she and I were internet friends and saw each other. She and her daughter run this business together. I don't know her daughter as well, and I'm not in any way intimately involved in their family where I would need to know all the details.
Right.
But it was like she made a post on Monday, and Wednesday there was no Miss Josiah. I since she passed, I have learned so much about myself. Like her transition was this catalyst for me in grief, in understanding what grief is, in allowing myself to grieve fully for the first time. And not only is she with me, like she is my loudest ancestor. Like I can hear her voice, I can hear her sass, and like she will come in and be like, "Really?" She told us this one time when we were at her studios in her house. We were at her house and she was tying our beads and she was talking about this woman who kept coming back to her over and over again. And so the way I wear my waist beads is if they break off, like they fall, they get whatever happens and they break, then that's done. Like mine
Right.
are a spiritual and energetic practice. So that energy is gone for me.
Mhm.
And she was telling us about this woman who kept coming back to have the same bead tied on. And she's like, it was almost comical. It was 10 times, Mia. And she was like, and I'd be like, oh, still haven't learned this lesson. Tie you back up and see you next week.
Oh my God, hilarious.
And so like that wisdom, that little lesson learning thing, she's like popping it in my brain all the time. And I can hear her sass and I can hear her dry. I just hear everything about her. But her passing, again, like has transformed who I am in the months that it has happened. It set me on this trajectory to explore parts of my childhood that I couldn't even remember until grief cleared enough space. Exploring grief, because again, as we transition, you have to grieve. Something is
Mhm.
going. It's okay that something is
Yeah.
going. It's
Yeah.
beautiful, and we have to let things go so that we have space for more, but it's going. And it's okay to be sad about that or whatever you feel about that. Like, let's at least acknowledge it instead of pretending that we're all fine, everything's okay. Zen. And and so when I think of why things happen or what the reasons are, I just think in like that, and that is like the most abstract sense, right? She lives in Los Angeles. I know
Mhm.
her through the internet. We send each other really interesting reels back and forth and have these like really expansive conversations, right? And she's like this wisdom elder for me, but like we don't go to each other's birthday parties. We don't
Right.
know each other that well. I mean, she's Ronan's auntie, but her transition has profoundly impacted my life.
Mhm.
And I have no idea who else has been impacted in that way or what else has been impacted in that way.
Right.
But it's the more experiences I have like this, the more respect I have for the individual paths that we are
Mhm.
all on, and even the parts that we don't understand or the parts that seem scary or wrong to us. There
Right.
is a reason and there is something that's at work there. We just have to get still enough to figure it out.
And you get still, it's not like you're actually hearing voices, it's just getting still with yourself to go through the grieving process and just feeling it all in your body.
Mhm.
It's not
Mhm.
like actually having a conversation with somebody who's passed
Right.
necessarily.
Necessarily. That's fun too. But
And then I want to talk about, I know, I want to talk about the story you shared about taking a break and walking into a cemetery and your
mm,
experience of that.
yeah, so this morning, um, I was still having a lot of residual thought processes about my day yesterday, my experience yesterday. And I've been doing pretty good, like shaking things off and moving through them. But there was still, I just still felt like this tightness in my heart space. And I wanted to pause to eat. And I really wanted to clear my field before we had this conversation. I think that is like my biggest responsibility before I have a conversation, especially one that other people might listen to, is to clear my stuff out of the way. And as I was driving into town, I saw this old church and this really, really old cemetery. Like you can't even read most of the names on the stones. And so I pulled in and I parked to eat my breakfast. And as I was sitting there, I was just like, oh, I really want to go walk. And as soon as I walked in, it was just like I could fully, like all of that chest tightness was gone. And it was like I could fully breathe again. And I don't know if you have to overcome your conditioning around end of life transitions and death and die. I don't know what it is, but there's something so expansive and peaceful about those, about in the energy of those who have passed, who have transitioned. Even this man who was telling me this really hard story about taking his own life and how he's really frustrated, there wasn't it was just very matter of fact. Like, this is what happened. This is how I feel about it. I don't know how to help from where I am now. But there wasn't like tension and angst and frustration and questioning. It's just like, and just
Just
like
is.
acceptance. Yeah, it just is. And I think that can also be found in nature.
Mhm.
But I
I
think there's something personal, more personal about it for me, at least what I experienced this morning in the cemetery. I felt like there were elders hugging me this morning in the cemetery. And like I felt like it was
That's
okay.
beautiful.
Like I felt like I was a little kid and there was a lot of grandmothers who were like, yeah, that was crazy yesterday and you're okay now. And there's nothing wrong with you. And like all the things that you would want to hear from like this perfectly well-adjusted caregiver that you'll never have. Because
Yourself.
we're humans and we're messy and that's what we're
Right.
supposed to do, you know.
Right.
But there's just this, it's like I think maybe the unconditionality of it
Yeah. I think what
is
struck me
comforting.
when you first told me the story is essentially, what you're sharing about the expansiveness that you felt walking into a cemetery because they didn't have the drama and the constriction of the physical reality of their being,
Mhm.
which is so interesting, right? Because we do feel grief when somebody passes, and it's hard to wrap our minds around the everlasting soul and the expansiveness that we can all feel when we transition because
Mhm.
we're not bogged down by our own perceptions, lived, perceptions, whatever, but also, based on our conversations that we've had today, don't you feel like we can be in that space of the everlasting soul when we step into curiosity, when we pause, and when we move through life with intention?
Mhm. I
Because when we
Yeah.
do that, we're literally letting go of everything that we perceive to be annoying, to be wrong, to be, judgy.
Mhm. I think it's completely possible. And I think in some respects, that's why some of us feel more comfortable in the world of the dead or in the spiritual world. Like even like I was talking about my trees. Before I knew anything about Druid culture, and that this is a whole thing where my ancestors came from. When we moved to this property, there's a walking trail that my dog and I walk on every morning and every night. And over the course of the past year and a half that we've lived here, there are certain trees that have been populated with guides, certain guides of mine or certain ancestors of mine, ones I know, ones I don't know. And it's like it feels like you're always seen and you're always heard.
Mhm.
And that's not always possible in the human world.
Right.
And so those energetic cues that humans might be missing, or you know what I mean, like the person at Thanksgiving last week who I watched everybody ignore before I went over and sat with them. Like there's none of that. And
Mhm.
so there's just the ability, even with people, my grandfather passed right after my son was born, before I ever believed that I could commune with the deceased or any of this. And his and my relationship had gotten we were very relatively close when I was growing up. And as in basically in my relationship, my ex-husband is Black, and my grandfather had a few like mildly racist things to say. And I lost all my like respect or desire to be a part of that relationship anymore. He, um, I think when Ronan was like 3, he showed up in our basement and Ronan came and got me because there was a mean, grumpy man downstairs. And I went and talked to him. And it was like, even the hard things that I needed to say to him, like, this is how you made me feel when you did this. Like, why would you do this? We were able to talk about. And so I had these memories of my entire life of like shocking him and him being disgusted with me. Like I got a tattoo when I turned 18 and girls shouldn't have tattoos. So he was horrified. He didn't speak to
Right.
me for like 3 weeks. And so that what I remembered was that the times he had scolded me or the times that and when I said that to him, or the times that he had hurt me or hadn't understood how I could be in a biracial relationship. And he said that from his perspective, I had always been pushing him to grow. And he said, what you don't remember is that every single time that happened, I always came back. And things that I had never been able to understand about people, I understood because you were my granddaughter and I loved you enough to try.
Oh,
And we could have never had that conversation in real life because I would have had too many stories and he would have had too many stories and we would have felt weird about saying the truth in front of each other. And so now I have this beautiful relationship with my grandfather again,
yeah.
that
Oh,
never would have been
man.
possible. And so there's
Right.
just, there's the release of all of that humanness.
Mhm.
And expansive is like the best word that I can think of to describe it.
Expansive.
Hmm.
Oh, if only everyone could communicate with those that have passed, that have walked
I
away.
believe, I truly believe that everybody is capable of everything. It's how much can you open yourself up to it? Like, how
Right,
curious can you get? Or do you want to believe it?
right,
Like
right,
my little mystical book reading self who just sat and read novels when I was a little girl. Like, I've been waiting for somebody to tell me that I could commune with the dead or that I could have spirit guides in trees. You know what I mean? Like, this is like my dream when I was a little kid.
right, right.
But you know
It's
what
a
I
lot of
mean?
people's dreams.
Right. So I think it just depends on how much you can open yourself up to the potential that could be your reality or that is your reality.
Right, right.
Because we all have people
Wow.
with us. I don't know anybody who doesn't have an
Yes.
ancestor somewhere hanging
Mm-hmm.
around, floating
Mm-hmm.
around,
We all
tapping
have
on
our
things.
guides. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
This was really eye-opening. The
Yeah.
nuggets, they're all so good. Thank you so
Mhm.
much.
Thank you for
Yeah.
having me. I feel like
Thank
it's such a
you.
pleasure to have a conversation with someone who's as open and receptive as you are. Like you should, it's not common that
Well,
I can
thank
show up
you.
and be my whole full self, you know?
Thank you. Thank you. So many lessons in our conversation today, and mostly I'm really excited for for us all to become doulas, to be doulas for our friends and our family
Hmm. And our babies.
and our babies. Most importantly, the babies.
Hmm. I
Yeah,
know. I'm excited about these
the
babies.
to shed all the programming so that we can actually listen to them
Hmm.
and really embody being willing to be taught by our children.
Hmm. For sure. Because they know.
They
They
know.
know.
They
Hmm.
know. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a beautiful day.
You too.